Man, that's cool. Alright, so, welcome to Cogmind. Cogmind is a roguelike in the classic style, as in, ASCII graphics if you want, turn-based, tile-based, etc., etc. And it's got a couple of very important differences from other roguelikes, actually more than a couple, and one of them is that it's commercially licensed, as in it costs money. And I'd actually like to do a video at some point on sort of the history of roguelikes going up to, from Rogue going up till now, till games that have actually made themselves into games worth buying. But for now I want to focus on this one and why it's so awesome, because it is really, really cool. So Cogmind is a game that surrounds the Cogmind, surprise, and you are that. The Cogmind is a robot that is a bit different from other robots in that you can actually sort of dynamically alter yourself with parts that you find. And you always start in this sort of area here, which has some basic parts laying on the ground for you to scavenge. And in this case I'm just going to equip some basic things, a couple of assault rifles, get some matter, and I'll explain all this as we go on. And I also want some extra stuff in my inventory because, of course, all these parts can and will be destroyed, so you always want to carry some spares. I think I'm going to go with legs, actually. So I want an extra weapon, extra propulsion, in this case legs. Definitely want a power source and a spare one of those. And we're going to move on. Let's not tackle that robot. And this is where the game will begin proper. So, welcome. Now you may have noticed that that tile there representing the stairs was actually stairs going up. And that's actually one of the first important differences. You ascend in this game. In a lot of classical roguelikes you are starting on the first floor of some kind of dungeon and descending into its depths. Whereas in Cogmind you are starting at the bottom of an underground complex and actually ascending towards the surface. And it gets harder and harder as you get closer to the surface. And it's kind of the area you're in, the sort of complex, is laid out a bit like an underground skyscraper, is kind of a good way to think about it. There are optional branches going along the side of the main ascension path, as well as the actual path itself, that will take you through various different parts of the area, with different tile sets and different types of enemies along the way. And this is materials, where you will always begin. Materials is a sort of materials processing plant that lasts for a couple of floors, and has some basic enemies and some cool stuff for you to get. So, later on in the video I'm going to be talking over some footage that's farther into the game, up to floor 6 actually. But for now I want to talk about some of the stuff that's really interesting about this. So let me just actually show you some things. One of the best and coolest parts about this game is its interface. So, not very many traditional roguelikes have a mouse-driven interface that you can actually use mouse and or keyboard very effectively on. So if I want to just use the mouse and click where I want to go, I can. And a lot of newer roguelikes do have some mouse control, but it generally ends with clicking where you want to go, clicking an item to pick it up, and clicking an item that you have picked up to equip it, and that's about it. This even has things like drag and drop, so if I want I can put this leg over a wheel to equip it. It's got mouse aiming here, if I just enable the volley, which is firing your weapons. It's got things like right-clicking anything to learn more about it. This really cool little window pops up here, and you can even click on every individual thing and it will tell you more about that thing. And that's actually really important, because one of the biggest kind of issues with a lot of new players trying to get into the sort of classic roguelike scene is they're quite difficult to understand, and the interface is not very user-friendly a lot of the time. And some of these don't necessarily make sense to people, like what the heck is core exposure? Well, if you click it, it'll tell you. And you don't need to search through a manual in the game's directory every time you want to learn something. And it makes the learning experience a lot quicker and a lot easier. But not only that, if you do want a manual, the manual is actually in-game as well and keyworded and searchable if you do want to understand a bit more of the nitty-gritty about how the game works, which is very cool. You can even alter the font and font size of the interface itself. And this is a great game for getting used to ASCII graphics. If you want to play classic roguelikes that don't have graphical tiles like this one, all you do is hit F3 and suddenly everything's in ASCII mode. No restarting the game or moving tile sets in and out of directories, just hit F3. And it's even presented in a kind of gameplay-like way with, it's sort of presented like your Cogmind is changing its scanner mode, basically. And then just hit F3 again, and you're back to tile mode if you see something that you're confused by. You can also right-click anything you want, and you get some really sweet ASCII art. Every item in the game has ASCII art, which is awesome. I love it. And a really nice description of what it does, which again can be a problem. A lot of earlier roguelikes, you see people going to wikis to search for exactly what it does and what all the stats mean, and it takes a lot of learning to understand everything about everything, basically. In this case, not so much. I'm actually going to equip that for now. There's a lot of really cool bits about this game, and it actually feels a lot like a modern game, but still having all of the complex interactions and trappings of a classic roguelike. Now, these are pests, literally. They're actually called that. And they live up to their name. And combat works very simply, but very, very cleanly. So you just target what you want to hit, and you shoot at it. And you will be quite inaccurate at first. That's a word, inaccurate. And the pests will swarm the crap out of you. But the accuracy is affected in different ways, like standing still for multiple turns, things getting closer to you, and equipping multiple weapons that don't have too much recoil, because recoil is actually simulated. So if you have a cannon that shoots first, and then a smaller weapon that shoots second in your volley, that cannon's recoil is going to affect the accuracy of the weapon that shoots second, that kind of thing. And that's really cool that all that's actually simulated, and it's even shown if you just right-click a weapon. Recoil, right here. Boop. Any other weapons fired in the same volley disable this penalty to their accuracy. It just tells you straight up right there. That's not a, crazy arcane game mechanic like it would be in some other roguelikes that you have to learn through multiple playthroughs. It's just laid out right here. Click it, and you learn it, and you know it. That's that. And you can actually learn to play this game quite efficiently through just a few early plays and learn more easily what you should be doing. Now, you may notice I took a lot of damage on my parts here. This is a really cool part of the game. So every single part, if I just click something here, has this coverage, and this represents the likelihood of it being hit. I mean, coverage represents literally how much physical space it covers on your core. And the higher the coverage of something, the more likely it is to get hit when you're attacked. And your actual core itself has 100 coverage. So, and it actually dynamically updates with this little percentage here based on what else you have equipped, and it tells you how likely in a percentage-based way that thing is, compared to everything else you currently have on you, is to get hit from an enemy volley, which makes one of the main game mechanics actually being, hit individually on all of your pieces and getting picked apart in combat, very transparent and very easy to understand for the player, while still being complex and interesting, which I appreciate a lot for a roguelike, having played many of these throughout the years. And yeah, everything can take damage and can be lopped off by katanas and blades and blade traps, and can be destroyed, or just detached by various means. And that's why you need extras. You can salvage equipment from destroyed enemies, or just find it lying around, or have it made by fabricators. Let's look at this terminal here. This is an interesting part of the game as well. You can get various pieces of hackware to make all of this easier and do more with it, but right now I'm just accessing the terminal in the most basic way possible. You can get records to understand more of the lore of the game. You can get schematics, which allow you to make that thing at a fabricator. And you can do some other stuff as well. Like, for instance, if I want to even enter a manual command, if you look at what the commands are typed out here when you click these, you can sort of learn the syntax of the terminals yourself. So if I want to learn the where the stairs up are marked on the map, I actually know. You just type in access main. Boop. And it failed because it had a low chance. This is a high security terminal, had a low chance of success, which means I need to get out of here because they're about to trace me. It is turn-based, of course, so this isn't going to go any higher unless I try to do something else. But if I do even one more thing on this terminal, it is very, very likely that they will detect me, and a bunch of security bots will come after me and probably pick me to pieces, and I'm not ready for that kind of attention yet. And more, oh no, pests. And more or less, this is basically how the game actually works. You know what, I should retreat into a doorway so only one of them can attack me at once. You will ascend even higher, and, well, higher and higher, and, oh god! Try and, work your way through as many floors of nonsense as you possibly can, all the while, oh boy, all the while overcoming the odds of all sorts of crazy robots that really, really want to kill you, and even finding NPCs that will help you along the way and some other really cool stuff, and even sort of boss level monsters, and there's like huge robots that take up multiple tiles on the screen that are very scary. My wheels! And yeah, so there's some very, very cool stuff here, and I think right now, just because I'm not doing very well because I'm talking, I'm actually going to show you some actual play. Ooh, that's Scandalizer. You can find unidentified items, by the way, that can be very good or very faulty prototypes, and you can put them into the Scandalizer to show you which one it is, if you have the time. But yeah, I'll go ahead and show you some later gameplay without too many spoilers or anything in it. So yeah, I will see you in a moment. Alright, so this is mostly me just kind of messing around. It's not how you should play, kind of deliberately. It's me trying to show off some like higher tier weapons and their effects and sounds and things like that, and fighting some, you know, more advanced enemies and the like. You obviously should not play like this. It's me also showing off like the overheating and some of the other mechanics like that. Don't do this. Make like huge volleys of weapons that will obviously just blow you up when you use them all at once. I'm just doing this for like demonstration purposes. And because I thought it would be fun, and it was fun. But yeah, so this is a bit later up in the factory levels. And well, we should also mention one of the more unique things about the game at this point, which would be the leveling system. And that it doesn't have one. There is no experience. You do not gain experience or anything like that by destroying enemies, although it is a necessary thing to do, generally speaking, because if the enemy robots are in your way, well, if you don't destroy them, they are going to happily pick you to pieces. And of course, destroying them does provide you with useful parts. However, you'll notice there is no experience bar or anything like that, and you will get to enjoy the very sweet Ascii art going on here. However, the way you do get stronger is by ascending the stairs. Every sort of main stairwell, except for the first one that you saw me go through in the beginning. And when you go up the stairs, you will gain an evolution. And what an evolution does is actually pretty cool. You notice that I actually have more slots now in my... not just in my inventory, because that's actually something that I have equipped, that's a storage unit, but in my actual build up there. I've got like 3 propulsion slots, I've got multiple power slots, there's a couple extra weapons, or one extra weapon. I've got a bunch of utility slots. That's because of the evolution. That is basically your level up for this particular game. When you ascend a staircase in the main path up through the game, you will get 2 evolution points to spend, which you can spend on getting a slot of your choice in one of the categories. So a new power slot for more energy generators, a new propulsion slot for more legs or wheels or treads or flight units or whatever, and so on and so forth. And you can make yourself like a giant, you know, 6-treaded tank with 5 cannons or whatever you want after enough evolutions. Every evolution also gives you more passive heat dissipation and more core strength, which is your HP. Because, of course, if your coverage, everything that you're covered with doesn't get hit. Whatever hits you will hit your core, which is your main health. And if that goes to 0, then you're done. It will also wipe out, evolving will wipe out your system corruption, which is something I should mention. There are lots of damage types in this game, which is something I've always enjoyed, and one of the damage types is EM, electromagnetic, and it can corrupt your system. There are a couple other ways to do it, but that's one of the main ones, and having system corruption is very bad. Very bad. It glitches up your screen and stuff, which you can actually turn off if you find it annoying, of course. And it can cause your Cogmind to just randomly dislike parts and just detach them for no reason. You'll just be walking around and suddenly you'll lose a leg. It can also cause your accuracy to be misreported or lowered artificially. It can cause weapons to misfire, just shoot suddenly while you're walking around, which can be a big problem, especially if you have like a grenade launcher or something equipped and like you're in a tight corridor just walking around and it just decides that it wants to shoot all of a sudden. That's a problem. It can cause all sorts of big issues, and if your corruption ever gets to 100%, then you are done for. But of course, ascending will change that. And this is also where I should mention branches, because that's a very important part of the gameplay. So, branches are optional side areas in the main path. Like I said, if you think of the complex you're in as a sort of underground skyscraper, branches would be the side bits. I mean, branch being a good kind of euphemism for what they are. And there's often some very, very good loot in these places, really good equipment. But sometimes this very good equipment is, held by machines that are using it against you. So good luck with that. Sometimes it's on the ground, and other times it's just, you gotta find it in secret rooms and the like. But when you go to a branch, even though it's technically an ascension upstairs oftentimes, it's kind of sideways, and you do not get an evolution for doing this. Which means your health is not restored either, by the way. When you get an evolution, all of your health is restored. It doesn't happen when you go to a branch. So these are kind of for like more advanced players only, generally speaking, even though newer players will just stumble into them all the time because they're not marked. If you don't know what you're doing, like you can wander into the mines, for instance, which is a branch very easily. It's a branch of materials, the first area you'll be in. And the mines is quite dangerous. There's a lot of cave-ins that can happen there, which can end your game immediately. There's some pretty tough enemies later on in there, but there's also some NPCs and some really good loot that you can find to help you out. And the branches will eventually reconnect to the main pathway, where you will eventually get your evolutions, and you can continue in the main sort of story progression. But that's an interesting way to do things. That's not, unique to this game. Other roguelikes have done that, but because of the way the leveling system works, I felt like it would be an important thing to mention. So yeah, there's also some interesting things with how some of the equipment works, like you can get computer chips, like hackware and things like that equip to your utility slots, and because they're technically like integrated PCBs and the like, you can't remove them without destroying them. So there's like a once and done kind of thing. And there's all sorts of builds you can make. This game has a huge variety in builds. You can be, like I said, a tank, just armed with treads and huge cannons, plasma cannons and missile launchers. Or you can be a lithe, carbon fiber-legged, ranged hacker type of machine. And I know the comparison is somewhat tired by a lot of people, but honestly, it does remind me a bit of games like Dark Souls, in that it, in the way that the builds are kind of the main point, I guess you could say, and that every playthrough you can make a very different build and have just as much fun as the last one trying to figure out what you should do, with this build. It's great, actually, and I really enjoy the game. I should mention, it's rare. It's rare for me to say that there's a game that is kind of going for taking something that was popular, that is older, and making it for a more modern audience, and for people to not hate that idea immediately. How many times have you heard like a AAA dev say something like that? Say like, oh well, we're changing it for a modern audience, and everyone like cringes their necks off. But in this case, that actually isn't a bad thing, because it's done without sacrifice. They're taking, I say, Grid Sage Games is basically one person, almost, Josh, and he really knows what he's doing. He's basically taking the classic turn-based, tile-based roguelike, and updating it for a modern kind of audience with very good mouse support, an excellent interface that responds very well and has some really neat touches, context-sensitive actions that actually make sense. Like, for instance, just if you control-click something on the ground, it automatically equips it rather than putting it in your inventory. If you have another one of those or a similar item automatically, or a similar item equipped that's damaged or more damaged than the one that you're clicking on, it will automatically replace it. That's just the kind of small little thing, little detail, that in traditional roguelikes would require like several button combinations to actually do, and would be kind of obnoxious every time you needed to do it, but it's just something that people that play a lot of roguelikes, like myself, get used to doing over time. And it's that sort of thing that's that kind of updating for a modern audience that doesn't involve sacrificing what the games actually are, and that there's all of the traditional trappings, all of the complex interactions, all of the difficulty, all of the interesting build variety, all of that is still intact without any kind of compromise whatsoever. And yet, there's so much new here that I think a lot of newly developing roguelikes in the scene could really learn from. And I'm impressed with that. The game is available on the site, which I'll link you to. There are various packages for sale. They're sort of like supporter packages. And the lowest price one right now is $20. The price has been fluctuating here and there because, well, going down, I should say, it's not really fluctuating. And that's mostly because the packages are meant to be more of a support for the game as it develops kind of thing. And it's not on Steam yet, but it will be soon. And if you're worried about, waiting, you want to buy it, but you want to wait until it's on Steam, you don't actually have to worry about that, because if you do buy it off of their site, you get a Steam key as well when it does get on Steam. So you don't have to, worry about that. It's pretty great, and I think all of these reasons and more, and also the idea that it kind of reminds me of a lot of classic mech games that I used to love as a kid, like MechWarrior and Earthsiege 2 and things like that, is probably one of the reasons why I've played a lot of it and will continue to do so. It's great. Also, I love the little touch that when you fire like large energy cannon style weapons, the drain of the energy actually messes with your interface a little bit. Like you're turning on your microwave or something in your house and your lights dim for a second. It's that kind of effect. It's really cool. The minigun actually fires out like little Ascii smoke particles behind you as the projectiles shoot forward. There's a lot of the firing effects for weapons are really cool. But yeah, it even has a sound engine, by the way, and a full sound engine that that actually makes the sound get louder and quieter as you go from room to room, and different things make sound. The various bits of machinery can actually be damaged and destroyed. The little green robots that you're seeing around the place actually do a job independent of you being there, so serfs will actually go and pick up random crap that they find, and if you destroy a machine, they'll take the damaged bits and actually put it into recyclers around the level, and you can actually find the recyclers and get the damaged bits out if you want. And the levels actually have a sort of ecosystem that goes on without you, and is actually pretty fascinating to watch, and the machines actually work and do things, and there's a sort of circuit there, you could say, of each of the machines doing what they're meant to do. But yeah, it's actually a pretty special game. There's a lot of work being put into this game, and it's really something quite unique as a result of all that. So that's Cogmind, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation, I guess you could say. It's fantastic, and I could watch and listen to those firing effects of all the different weapons all day, because they're super cool. And they actually make 2D combat very satisfying. Even though it's all Ascii characters, it's still really sweet. And the Ascii art of every item is pretty fantastic too, so yeah. That's Cogmind again. In the description, of course, will be the website's link to learn more. There's a demo, by the way, if you want to try that out, just to see what it's like. And pick it up if you're interested. Again, Steam key will be forthcoming when they get it on Steam. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.